Yo, Coach Matt here. I'm going to run you through the Santa Barbara Triathlon course and give you all the tips you need to have your best possible race. I'm not affiliated with the race. There's an hour-long video you can watch that really dives into the ins and outs of everything. I'm just going to cover the big things for people who are trying to do their best race. So first off, there's going to be a 7 a.m. start. It is a time trial start this year. Parking gets a little crazy for this race. Transition area opens at 5, thank goodness. This is where the race is going to be. The big parking lot is going to be closed. Your best bet, if you live in town, live within 2 or 3 miles, is probably to ride your bike and have someone come pick you up later. Otherwise, you're going to be looking for street parking right around here. Dwight Murphy Field has been my go-to. I hesitate to tell everyone this because I'm not going to show up till 6:30, and I have always been able to find parking around Dwight Murphy Field. For the swim course, if you're familiar with Reef and Run, if you're in Santa Barbara, then you've done the swim course. You run out, you take a right turn, you swim straight. Sighting off of the pier is a decent way to sight. There's also a hill with some buildings. You'll turn right again, make a little short shoot, make another right. The swim course is easier on the way back than it is on the way out. Again, if you've done Reef and Run at night, you know that there's a lot of surface level chop because of the wind, and it's an easier ride on the way back. So when you find yourself struggling on the way out, don't worry about it. As soon as you make the last right-hand turn, you're going to be flying on the way home. We don't get a lot of surf in Santa Barbara, so you can expect it to be a pretty chill swim. However, you guys are starting at 7 and peak tide is at 8:20. So even though the wind should be nice and calm, it'll probably be foggy, overcast. You're not going to have surface chop. You might have a little bit of a decent swell. And again, that's relative to Santa Barbara. No real breakers to speak of, but once you get past the little tiny breakers we might have, I would expect a little bit of rolling swell given that high tide is about an hour after you're getting into water. Time trial start based on your projected swim finish. Bike course. Now here's the real gem of the Santa Barbara Tri. Our bike course, very hilly, very technical, again, as triathlons go. The first 6.5, 7 miles of this bike course are where you're either going to blow your legs, set yourself up for success for the rest of the day. When you come out of transition, it's hilly, it's twisty, it's easy to be sprinting up these short little hills and then sprinting out of corners, trying to save a second or two here or there, especially because you're all full of adrenaline from transition, but you really, really want to hold back through here. Because when you turn left on Sheffield, it's a nice shallow climb. It's an easy climb to go a little too hard on because once you make the turn onto Ortega, it gets really steep. And here for the whole section, if you go too hard, then you're going to be sucking wind for the most important part of the bike course to come. One thing to keep in mind, there's going to be a convoluted little section on San Ysidro Road where they're doing construction. So when you come up to this, don't freak out if there's a little delay. Just expect it. Everyone's going to have to deal with it, but you might get routed through a very narrow section of the bike course. Once you get to the top of Ortega Hill, you're going to make a left turn and then a really steep, super fast descent until you get to the bottom. There's a right-hand corner, which locals know well. Many of us have wiped out on it. It's going to be overcast in the morning. Roads will probably be a little damp. Plus, there's often a little bit of dust, sand, gravel on this right-hand turn. This is a sketchy turn, so be careful coming into that right-hander. Once you get through that, now you're really into the meat of the bike course. You have a long, gently rolling, slightly uphill section to the climb of Gubernator Canyon. This is where you want to stay aero. Focus on watts if you have them. If not, just focus on being consistent in those aero bars. The first part of Goob, the climb is really, really shallow. You'll be able to stay in aero for most of that. And then you get to the top and there's a nice steep kicker, but it's really, really short. Historically, there's been a water bottle hand up just over the top of Goob, but the water bottle hand up hasn't been very big. It's been nothing like a 70.3. So my suggestion is be self-sufficient on this bike ride. Take all your calories, take all your water. Don't worry about dealing with that water bottle hand up. You have a similar descent off the back of Goob that you had on Ortega. It's very fast until you get right to the bottom. This is kind of a tricky one because it's not a singular right-hand turn. It's a slight right into a sharp right. The sharp right comes out on a busy road with speed limits of 55 miles an hour. You want to be able to come to a complete stop at the bottom of this hill if you absolutely have to, because cars go pretty quick on this road. It'll still be early in the day, so there won't be much traffic, but this is the road that leads to a nice lake and a nice little resort town, so it does get a decent amount of cars. Then you have a flat, fast section followed by a quick little climb back into where you retrace your steps. One thing I should have mentioned, this road right here north of Carpinteria is torn up. So expect to be rattling around on your handlebars through this section. But just like the way out, focus on staying aero, focus on being consistent, and then you're going to start the climb of Toro Canyon. This one is hard all the way. It's the hardest climb of the course. But the good news is, once you get to the top, your energy expenditure for the course is pretty much done. This would be an excellent time to pop an extra goo and digest it on the long downhill into transition. You can carry a lot of speed through this downhill, just like with the others. It's not very technical. The turns are pretty open. And then you'll get back into town where traffic is generally a little bit busier by the time racers are coming back into town. So you might have to deal with a little bit more traffic on the way back in. Just keep your head up, be careful. You'll go back through that narrow section on San Ysidro Road. 10-mile run is pretty straightforward. My best recommendation is that you hold back early on this 2-mile flat section, leading into a long, gradual uphill section to the turnaround. It's easy to overdo the flat section, and let me tell you, after you have done 2 miles of pretty consistent downhill from the turnaround, it can be really, really hard on the quads to go back to running flat. So even though this seems like a course where you should really give a lot of energy on the front half because it's mostly uphill on the way out, you got to remember the last 2 miles are pancake flat. You're not getting any downhill help from them. So hold back a little bit early on. Then when you start the climb, you get one steep little hill, but quickly it turns into more of a gradual 2 to 3% grade up to a pretty sweet footbridge. Once you get to the footbridge, you're in a flatter section, gently rolling, but there's not a big net elevation gain or loss to the turnaround. Coming back, once you get back to the footbridge, you know, okay, now I got like 1.5 miles, 2 miles of consecutive downhill, finishing with a short, steep downhill back into a longer, flatter section. There will be water hand-ups. They'll have some calories in cups, but similar to the bike. My suggestion would be to be pretty self-sufficient with calories. If you want goos, bring those. The race a few years ago was sponsored by Cliff Bar, and they had Cliff gels, but last year they didn't have a specific type of gel available. So if you like your own gel, just bring that with you. Secondarily, it'll probably be foggy and cool for a good chunk of the race, but at some point that fog's going to burn off. It could be early on the bike. It could be when you're almost done with the run. But you want to keep in mind that when that fog burns off, this run course is going to get really, really toasty. So even if it's nice and cool and overcast on the way out, you want to keep in mind how much harder the way back can be, even though it's net downhill, because it might be 10, 15 degrees hotter on the way back than on the way out.